one of the key trends, of course, is analytics. Everybody's talking about analytics. Everybody's talking about measuring. You're a big measuring guy, and you need data to support all of your opinions. But I worry about the human component, about the behavioral component, which we also work at EHST in many of our programs. So what do you think the combination of those two, how does that work out?
I share your sort of concern over that, because I think that we know that Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel laureate, started off documenting all these cognitive biases that sneak up on us unconsciously, and I think that when we go to look for the data, where to collect it, for example, when we get our data and we're trying to figure out what analytics method to use, and then when we get our results and we're interpreting the results, I think we all know that things like confirmation bias can be pretty sneaky, and so I worry, like you do, that if managers and decision makers aren't aware of those kinds of human behavioral biases, that what garbage in, garbage out, so to speak. But in this case, it's not the data that's to blame; it's actually the thinker, the behavioral side of it.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually reviewing the Heath brothers' work the other day, and there's so many biases. I mean, there's 40, 50. There's a list of biases, which is, confirmation bias, halo bias, gambler's fallacy, et cetera, et cetera. So many biases that many of us have, and many people don't realize that they have these biases. I mean, it's really interesting.
It is, and I think that I don't think we could ask people to keep track of them all, but I think there are a few big ones, like confirmation bias. The idea that, if I ask you, Norman, what's your opinion on something? Maybe you have no opinion, but you'll give me one. And then the second that you give me an opinion, you start to actually take a little step down the slippery slope of starting to buy into your own opinion.
And look for data that justifies.
And then you go look for data that justifies it, and then when you get a piece of data that supports it, you're much more likely to accept that data than data that goes against that opinion, even though all you've done is just put one little baby step forward and towards that opinion. So I think that's a dangerous one, confirmation bias.
Yeah. And regarding analytics, I mean, there's a lot of talk about wearables and the Apple Watch and many other gadgets that are being introduced into the market, which help measure many, many things. And I mean, I think the key question really is for companies is how do they leverage this information? How can they analyze this information? What value can they obtain from this information? I mean,
I think we're just at the beginning. I mean, I think you're talking about wearables, and the Apple Watch is really just the beginning. And when we start monitoring not just sleep and not just our heart rate, but blood glucose, heart rate variability,
micropunctures for blood glucose. I mean, that's there. It's just too expensive right now.
But it's so close. So, and I think once we have that, we can start to measure in real time. For example, our willpower, our self-control, which is somewhat related to blood glucose, for example, and then we can actually be in meetings and have little alerts on our watches and on our iPhones or smartphones that tell us, hey, be careful, your blood glucose is running low. Maybe it's time to pull the parachute, go get something to eat, and reconnect the meeting later. So,
yeah, because it's also, I mean, it's important to plan your day also based on your energy levels. Our energy levels vary during the day, and when our blood glucose is low, it's not the right time to make big decisions or make important decisions. Yeah. And a lot of people schedule difficult back-to-back meetings, end of the day, when people are tired, and that's not usually very productive in my experience.
No, and I think it's not just only about measuring things like what you were talking about, but it's also about just using basic things like reminders in an intelligent way, right? So, we have VIPs in a lot of our smartphones now, but we could have also our MDPs, our most difficult people. And when our smartphone knows that we're about to walk into a meeting with an MDP, it might alert us to try to listen, try to avoid conflict, or try to do something that isn't your default that might be a more productive behavior. So, what a fantastic way to use technology to shape behavior.
Yeah, because there's all these, one of our programs at the Masters in Talent Development and Human Resources, we're going to experiment with badges that people use in teams, and badges measure how much I speak to each of my team members and what tone of voice I employ, so that then it's easy to give feedback to the team to make it more cohesive and to help them work better. And this is just technology helping us coach the teams better, coach the student teams better, which of course could be used at the executive level also.
Yeah, and the team can walk out with having worn their electronic employee badges and get real data on how the meeting went and actually make real-time adjustments the next day.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually, and like you said, this is just the beginning. I mean, it's a revolution, and data's not going anywhere. And just interested about your opinion on how does big data relate to all of this? Everybody's talking about big data. Is it a buzzword or not? What do you think?
Well, I think if we go from the micro level of
Yeah.
us having
Analytics.
wearables and employee badges that measure communications, and then we get to the macro level, if you can aggregate that data at the organizational level, then you can start to get a dashboard on what's going on. How fit is your organization? How stressed out is your organization? How are their blood glucose levels running? Those kinds of things. And I think, assuming that privacy and anonymity kinds of concerns are addressed, I mean, what a fantastic way to do climate control, which of course is a big part of positive leadership.
And of course also well-being programs that of course take a huge advantage from these types of wearables, where you're able to measure people's health and people's progress on a well-being program, how that reduces insurance premiums, how it reduces sick days, how it improves productivity. So I mean, I think companies are at the beginning of a big change in how they work with their people.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I think they're just recognizing the link between well-being and the bottom line. So
Yeah.
maybe there's a fourth bottom line now, which is the employee well-being.
There's hope.